My name is Brett Joseph, and it is once again my pleasure to serve as moderator for today's session, along with my colleague, Madison Letitia Watts, CEO of the Center for Food Innovation, is with us on the screen. Madison is standing ready to receive and convey your questions and comments in the chat box. This webinar is the fourth in our six-part series, organized as an invitation to have a conversation about what we need to do to grow our Northeast Ohio food economy in a manner that yields abundance, health, and prosperity for ourselves and our communities. In Northeast Ohio, we are blessed with proximity to freshwater lakes, world-class educational and research institutions, an eclectic range of culinary traditions, and a strong entrepreneurial culture. Yet we are not immune to the global challenges of climate change, loss of forests, loss of soils, biodiversity, supply chain disruptions, and a well-documented rise of nutrition-related chronic illnesses. These are existential threats that we as a society can no longer afford to meet with denial or inaction. It has become clear that our current systems for food provisioning based on high input, fossil fuel intensive technologies of the Green Revolution need to change. What do we know? We know that nearly a third of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to sources within the agricultural sector. Here in the US, we know that 40% of our total food production goes to waste. If food waste were a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. We see that the soils and aquifers of our country's heartland are being depleted at a disturbing rate, even as our national addiction to meat-heavy diets keeps us locked into a system built on monocultures, chemical inputs, manure lagoons, and animal cruelty. To meet these challenges, we can encourage conscious consumerism, free-range organic meat products, and support for our local farmers markets, CSA farms, and food banks. These steps are important. However, are they enough? Can we afford to wager that the consumer education and promotion of alternative value chains can compete at a level sufficient to transform our food system at scale and within the timeframes needed to secure a habitable world for ourselves and our grandchildren? To address limits imposed by weather, shelf life, high input costs, and global price competition, we should do well to consider the role of technology-based solutions, such as controlled environment agriculture, manufactured food, precision robotics and sensors, and closed-loop systems for turning nutrient waste into value systems. Today, we are excited to have you join us as we take up a theme: how is technology innovation changing agriculture and the food system business landscape? In a moment, I will introduce our speaker, Richard Munson, author of Tech to Table, 25 Innovators Reimagining Food, an important contribution to our discourses on the future of food, filled with good news about how landmark advances in computing, engineering, and medicine are driving solutions to the biggest problems created by industrialized food, and how these applied technologies are creating new startups, attracting capital, and building markets with the potential to upend conventional agribusiness and its stranglehold on the food supply. During this hour, we will learn about these disruptive technologies, the entrepreneurs who have brought them forward, and their importance in the quest for a more sustainable and just food economy. We will examine what this could mean for Northeast Ohio. This webinar is co-hosted by the Center for Food Innovation and GLIDE, the Lorain County Community College's economic development organization. This is a webinar, which means that only the panelists have open mics and video. Although we are meeting on a virtual platform, we can simulate the engaging experience of being in person by using the chat box. I invite you all to say hello by introducing yourself in the chat, and then at any time during the program, you should feel free to express yourself in chat with comments and questions. Our speaker will answer questions at the end, and note you can adjust your chat audience from panelists to everyone. So, without further ado, let me talk about Richard Munson and before turning over to his presentation. Richard Munson has worked on clean energy and environmental issues for nonprofits in the private sector at universities and on Capitol Hill. He most recently was a senior director of the Environmental Defense Fund, where he advanced smart power in the Midwest. He has been senior vice president at Recycled Energy Development, the Chicago-based firm that seeks to cut greenhouse gas emissions by capturing waste energy, And at our nation's capital, he coordinated the Northeast Midwest Institute and congressional and state coalitions, bipartisan caucuses that conduct policy research and draft legislation on issues ranging from brownfields development, energy and environment, water quality, and manufacturing. Munson has received awards from Smart Grid Today, the Great Lakes Commission, U.S. Clean Heat and Power Association, and American Small Manufacturing Coalition. He sits on multiple boards and is Emeritus Director of Elevate, the Illinois Environmental Council, and the Institute for Health Policy Solutions. And as if all that was not impressive enough, Richard has authored a number of truly impactful books, including the one he will speak to today, published in 2001, Tech to Table. Also, Tesla, Inventor of the Modern, a revelatory biography of the man who transformed our world with the invention of electric motors, radio, robots, and robot control. He also wrote From Edison to Enron, an account of the history of electricity. Cardinals of Capitol Hill, tracing the machinations of congressional appropriators. And one that I'm definitely going to purchase is Cousteau, the Captain and His World. Richard, I grew up on Jacques Cousteau.
Yes,
great inspiration. Examining the famous ocean explorer as filmmaker. And I dare say that was the short version of Richard's bio.
Thank God.
Everyone, please check out reviews of Richard's book, which can be found at richardmunson.com or on Twitter at Dick Munson. And with that, it is truly an honor for me to welcome Richard Munson to talk about his 2021 book, Tech to Table. Richard, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind introduction, although I must admit it made me feel old while you were going through all the various disparate things that I tried to do. But thank you. Critical questions about food innovation, which I think is just an exciting topic. First, it's, why should we focus on Northeast Ohio? And secondly, why now? And so in the next 30 minutes or so, what I hope to do is to, with a bunch of pictures, highlight the breadth and vigor of what I think is happening in the ag tech entrepreneurs, and then discuss what that can mean for your state and region. And as noted, I look forward to questions and dialogue afterwards. I think that's, sort of the best part. To give you a sense of where I'm coming from, this was sort of, Brett outlined this in the introduction. I've long been interested in innovators. I did help start a startup and most recently wrote, as you noted, a biography of Nikola Tesla, who is an amazing innovator and inventor. And in my day jobs, I've tried to advance policies that would encourage environmental entrepreneurs, as you said, most recently as the Midwest Director of the Environmental Defense Fund. So about 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to focus on agriculture. As you had noted, I'd been doing a lot of work on clean energy. In part, it's an obvious choice because agriculture is the world's largest economic sector. It's $15 trillion. It's just massive. In part also because agriculture is at the core of so many of our most important issues, be those environmental, social, equity, health, you name it. Food and farms, are right there. But I also became, I think what tipped it for me is the knowledge that agriculture is the least digitalized sector. Some would say the least modernized sector of the American economy. And it's not only that. You look at R&D, for instance, research and development. The healthcare industry is spending about 21% of its resources on research and development. Even automotive industries are spending about 16%, but the global food industry is less than 1%. And what that means, I think, is not only does it present some real challenges and problems, but it also presents a whole lot of opportunities for innovation to come in to what I think is a bit of a void to making the food system more sustainable and more productive and more equitable. So I set out to meet and profile what turned out to be a bunch of very fascinating and engaging individuals who are trying to redefine what it means to farm and what we eat. So they're trying to profit by providing nutritious food sustainably and affordably. And as we were noting before this webinar began, it was a lot of fun simply because entrepreneurs themselves are an incredibly entertaining lot. And the research was also fun in part because it revealed surprises. I mean, for instance, the speed of the recent change in this critical and often overlooked sector is just stunning. Ag tech startups, for instance, last year alone attracted $52 billion worth of investment. That's almost double what it was the year before, and it's been almost doubling over the last 5, 6, 7 years. A remarkable change. What I also found is that, quite interestingly, almost all of the innovators that I focused on tended to not be previously involved with agriculture. They were, if you will, outsiders, bringing fresh perspectives to what has been referred to as a bit of a staid industry. So let me try and share my screen and introduce you to a few of these wild characters that I got a chance to profile. And how's that? Are we good?
Yeah, we
well,
from this end.
So what is this rise of entrepreneurs mean for the questions that you guys have been grappling with your webinars? I mean, why focus on Ohio? To be honest, it's a pretty simple answer. And that is that I got to, how do I bring this down? Hang on. There we go. The simple answer is that agriculture is the state's top industry. It's $124 billion. 1 out of every 7 Ohioans is employed somehow in this regard. You've got 900 major food processing plants. You're the leader in baked goods, snacks, spices, produce a lot of cattle and chickens. Farming is just huge in the state. And so I guess the question is, can Ohio maintain its ag leadership as ag changes? And can it survive the competition from other states that are trying to use ag tech to enhance their own economies and their own employment? Can it take advantage of the states, as you noted, its existing corporations, research centers, and farms in order to attract more investment and innovation? So when it comes to agriculture, I think we have 2 somewhat dramatically opposed views. The first is of a well-stocked supermarket, where at virtually any time of the year we expect to choose from a cornucopia of in-season and out-of-season fruits and vegetables, as well as an assortment of grains, meats, dairy products, you name it. The supermarket, in many ways, is a supply chain absolute marvel. No doubt it's been challenged by COVID, but it is, as you walk through these aisles, to think about how all of this fresh food got to you is really quite amazing. Another positive sign is that food's share of an average American budget fell by half since the 1950s to only 10%. What that means is that food is more people can afford meals, and that's great. Yet there's a second set of images in which agriculture is in trouble and causes trouble. It's already mentioned about the environment. Industrialized farming, according to some calculations, is the biggest cause of climate change, the livestock industry alone, largely because of the methane-laden burps from 1 billion cows. I know it sounds funny, but is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gases, emitting more than all the cars, trains, boats, and airplanes combined from burps. Think about that one. You get other environmental problems. Plowing leads to exposing farmlands to rain and wind erosion, leading to the loss of 30 soccer fields of soil every single minute. We clear-cut forests to make room for more farms, to grow more corn and soybean, to feed more cows. And that, of course, releases more greenhouse gases and destroys biodiversity. We irrigate crops, sucking up 80% of the planet's fresh water, as a result, depleting aquifers and acidifying soils. And then there are toxic chemicals. Spraying synthetic fertilizers and pesticides has clear benefits, but it also eliminates beneficial microbes, shrinks the land's fertility, and the runoff of these chemicals, moreover, causes about 70% of used water pollution. You'll probably recognize this runoff obviously also forms dead zones in oceans and lakes, this being yours, ours, Lake Erie, where no aquatic life can survive the green scum there off Toledo shores. And then we face the controversial issue of animal welfare. In addition to the massive scale of slaughter, chickens, cattle, and pigs spend most of their lives in cramped cages or jammed feedlots. Other food problems, of course, relate to equity and nutrition. We have lengthy lines often at food pantries because even in the United States, here in the 21st century, about 14%, a shocking number of American households lack sufficient food. And at the same time, it's not that nutritious of food in the sense that the obesity rates are now approaching about 40%. So let me suggest two other agriculture. One on the right is of the rolling farm fields, this could be of Ohio even, and the other of sleek tech centers. And it would seem that there could be hardly two different pictures of the American economy, in large part because, as I noted before, farming is the least digitalized or computerized or advanced technology sector. Yet in just the past few years, these worlds are colliding and disrupting an industry well known for its conventionalism. So before introducing you, what I mostly want to do is introduce you to a few farm and food innovators, but let me pose what I think are two rather obvious questions. The first is, why now? We've known for some time that agriculture presents health, equity, and environmental problems. So why are just in the recent years, food and farm innovators, entrepreneurs, suddenly attracting investments and capturing markets? I turn to Eric Schmidt. He used to be the CEO of Google, who asserts that we live in a rather unique era of rapid and stunning technological advances, particularly a confluence associated with sensors and data collection, leading edge computation, and advanced engineering or robotics. He calls this combination a super evolution that he claims will fundamentally, irrevocably transform wide-ranging industries. And he further argues that these innovations allow startups to advance faster than incumbents, resulting in what he views to be agile, powerful companies. And within just the past few years, this super evolution, this confluence of technologies, has made its way into the agricultural sector, spurred by a group of assertive entrepreneurs and creative investors who see opportunities to make money for themselves through innovation and to outcompete what they view as big ag, slow-moving oligopolies. So the second question that I think is an obvious one that we have to confront is, should we trust these innovators and their new technologies? And my short answer is not blindly. We remember or were mentioned the green revolution technologists in the 1950s and 1960s did amazing things, the increasing crop yields and reducing worldwide hunger. But their focus on chemicals and monoculture poisoned our lands and water, decreased food diversity, limited competition. Think even of some of what we thought were great innovations, like DDT at one point was going to be quite the savior. Even my favorite was margarine, was this magic food that turned out to be not quite so magical. They had downsides to them. So as we think about these new innovations, we have to, I think, recognize that today's advanced sensors and data analysis can be used to strictly judge whether these entrepreneurs are actually advancing sustainability. Do they protect the planet? And are they advancing equity? Do they provide nutritious food to a growing population? So food and farm entrepreneurs tend to be a diverse and driven lot. I could have chosen a lot of different individuals, but I hope Tech to Table provides a sense of just the fascinating individuals and the diverse changes that are coming to agriculture and food. I'll admit that some of these profiled innovators, some in the book and some that I'm going to introduce to you, they're going to fail or flounder, and others that I didn't mention are going to prosper. That's the way it is with startups. Startups are hard, very hard. But I think the key that we're seeing in the last few years is this new development that investors are placing billion-dollar bets of their own money on food and farm disruptions. And so let's explore a few of these. To give you a sense of these, let's meet a few. We'll start with one that you know of, but I guess I want to put this in a way to make you think that the likes of these innovators could or should be locating in Northeast Ohio. It's sort of the theme I want to sort of get across. So let's take a few. The one that you might at least know his product is Patrick Brown. He had a dream job, or his dream job, as professor of biochemistry at Stanford, where he helped discover how to block particles, particularly the AIDS virus, from infecting other cells. Yet about 10 years ago, during a sabbatical, he decided that there were bigger global problems to tackle. The most important, at least in his mind, was how we raise and slaughter animals to supply proteins. He concluded that he could write academic papers, organize workshops, but he'd never really motivate consumers to eat less animal-based meat. So in 2011, he founded Impossible Foods to create and market indistinguishable, in his mind, plant-based substitutes. He had a hunch that heme, this is the iron-rich and oxygen-carrying compound in blood and muscle tissues, as well as in some plants. He thought that heme would be the critical element that would give meat substitutes their protein as well as their meaty flavor. So he spent 5 years analyzing, dissecting a whole variety of plants that contained a bit of heme. And he began with clover, but eventually settled on the fermented roots of soybeans, from which he then created a plant-based burger that offers, at least according to a food writer, a bloody red meat-like appearance and texture that turns a tasty grayish brown when cooked. I love food writers. So last year, this is the grayish brown when cooked. Last year, Impossible Burger sold at more than 17,000 retail outlets, including Burger King and the White Castle chains. It's still obviously a niche market compared to the $176 billion big beef industry. But sales of plant-based foods have been growing at an annualized rate of about 30%. And UBS, which is the Swiss-based bank, predicts that plant-based sales will soar from about 5 billion today to 85 billion by the end of this decade. That'll mean that it's about equal to what the current big beef industry sales happen to be. That's a remarkable change. The change, put it another way, just think about this. Within the last few years, plant-based meats went from something that was a total oddity. We had those little veggie burgers that everybody turned their little nose up at. And now it's something that 70% of us have tried. A massive market transformation, or at least opening of markets. Brown has his critics and his skeptics, but to give you a sense of the glory of entrepreneurs, he argues that his innovative technology produces food that customers are going to prefer because they're both tastier and they're more nutritious. And he would also argue that they're better socially. They make meats from plants to reduce animal cruelty. As a result, they emit 90% less greenhouse gases than making a burger from cattle. He claims, and this is a quote, "If we succeed in our environmental mission, we will be the biggest, most impactful business in history." My point here is, like most aggressive entrepreneurs, Mr. Brown is not particularly modest. Another innovator trying to take the slaughter and pollution out of meats is Uma Valete, who came to the United States from India on a cardiology residency at the Mayo Clinic, where he used stem cells to repair muscle tissues that had been damaged by heart attacks. So he had long been concerned about animal cruelty and contamination at slaughterhouses. So he slowly realized that he could use stem cells to also grow animal muscle tissue, which essentially is meat. And he had a great quote as well. He concluded that if I continue as a cardiologist, I might save a few thousand lives over the next 30 years. But if I am successful in helping to change the way meat is made, I can positively impact billions of human lives and trillions of animal lives. I think returning to our theme of what makes an entrepreneur, optimism and idealism in many cases. So in 2015, Uma Valete founded what he then called Memphis Meats, which he recently named Upside Foods. And unlike Pat Brown, he doesn't focus on plants. He's extracting a few cells painlessly from animals and inserting them into a growth potent of nutrients, salts, and acidic buffers. The cells then multiply in bioreactors that look and act a lot like fermentation tanks within a beer brewery. The firm just a few months ago opened up a new facility outside San Francisco, which produces 50,000 pounds of cultured meat each year. And let me return to the issue, the theme of this webinar. What if the Center for Food Innovation could help push this startup's next production unit to be located in Northeast Ohio? Valente admits that some consumers will think it's weird to eat cell-cultured burgers and chicken nuggets, and he argues that it's even weirder to eat slaughtered animals and fecal contaminated meats, and he predicts that eaters will embrace the new offerings once they experience their meaty taste and understand their environmental and health benefits. Again, coming back to the theme of optimism. He recognizes that its costs have to fall and that its production capacity has to increase, which the second one is clearly a major concern of all entrepreneurs. On the cost dropping, they have fallen really dramatically. He expects the cultured beef this year will cost as little as $10 a pound. That's still about 20% more than grass-fed meat, but it is an amazing decline from the $1.2 million per pound that was paid for by the first cell-based patty that was introduced just 8 years ago. 8 years. So to give you a sense of the innovation, let's meet a few more entrepreneurs, but I'll do these a little more quickly if that's okay. This is the new facility that Upside Foods has built outside of Chicago, next one of which will be in Northeast Ohio. These are some of his cell-cultured meats that come in a variety of forms that he has made available for chefs and tasting. This next one these are Diane Wu and Purnima Parswaran. They met in graduate school at Stanford and formed a company called Trace Genomics in 2015 to offer essentially DNA kits for soil. These are not unlike the genetic tests such as 23andMe that provide insights into our humans, if you will, our ancestry, our health, our traits. The pair analyzes a small grams of soil from different parts of a field, digitalizes the vast amount of data about bacteria, fungi, viruses, and then compares those results through proprietary algorithms with thousands of other soil samples. And then the key point here is provide actionable intelligence to farmers about what seeds to plant where and what nutrients to feed the soil's microbes and how to avoid the diseases that lurk in the soil. What they're doing, at least from their perspective, is that these types of decisions that the farmers face every single year, tough ones, and challenging ones, ones that they're risking, a year's economy on their choices. They have in the past, according to these two entrepreneurs, been an art form. They are trying to make it a science. The next crew, Jenny Dube, James Rogers, and Lou Perez, they want to cut food waste in half. They have PhDs in material science and chemistry from UC Santa Barbara, and they devise plant-based coatings that double the shelf life of avocados, lemons, and other produce. As Brett noted at the beginning, we waste a staggering 40% of our food. I mean, wrapping your mind around that is just stunning. The produce spoilage segment of that problem, according to these innovators, is rather straightforward. They say the two leading causes are water loss and oxidation. That's water evaporating out of the produce and oxygen getting in. So what they do, they have created a variety of tasteless, invisible, and edible coatings that consist of organic compounds that they've extracted from plant peels and pulp that act as a physical barrier to keep water out and oxygen in. And this is a sample from their publicity as to what the change is by having these coatings, the ability to double the shelf life and therefore vastly reduce at least one segment of the food waste category. They have investors that are quite wide and diverse. Oprah Winfrey is one, for instance. The startup recently closed another $250 million capital raise, so it is now a $2 billion valuation, which in the terms of the ag tech industry, that makes it one of the many new ag tech unicorns, as they call it. One of my favorites, and probably one that appeals to your work on vertical farming, is Irving Fain. He's the CEO of a company called Bowery. And he, in one regard, is totally redefining the farm from a vast horizontal expanse of land to a vertical warehouse in urban and suburban centers that do not rely on soil or sunlight. These things are designed by the designer of their warehouses. They have sensors for virtually every single plant. They have robots. They're providing essentially bok choy and lettuce instead of books and jewelry. But it's sort of the same approach of thinking about what a warehouse can do. They're hydroponic or aeroponic. They're nurtured by LED lights. Robots dominate the system, providing nutrients to individual plants rather than entire fields. They use no pesticides. They cut water use by 95%. Significantly, their growing season obviously never ends, so they can quickly deliver fresh and organic greens to local restaurants and supermarkets throughout the year. And Fain, I should say, really takes great pride in noting that his urban and/or vertical farms offer economic development and good-paying jobs at abandoned spaces within neglected neighborhoods. Allow me to do the rapid review of entrepreneurs, but here are Thomas Palarmas and Sebastian Boyer. They grew up as friends in France before coming to the United States, one going to MIT and one to Stanford. They offer autonomous machines or robots that detect weeds and then scoop them out by their roots without using any poisonous herbicides. The technology within this orange Zamboni looking robot is just stunning. FarmWise has taken thousands and thousands of pictures of different weeds and crops at various stages of development and under divergent growing conditions. And with machine learning, it creates images of what needs to be removed and what needs to be protected, deploying algorithms that they claim are even more sophisticated than those that Facebook and Google use to recognize our faces. So the machine goes through the field, differentiates between sprouts that will become broccoli or some other produce, and those that will grow into pigweed or other invasive weeds. And then the robot itself deploys its plucker and removes the unwanted plants from the fields, avoiding both hours of back-breaking labor as well as the delivery of poisonous herbicides. And yes, it has the advantage it can operate 24 hours a day. Virginia Emery is taking a different approach to innovation. She is breeding customized bugs at industrial volumes. Why this is important is because the bugs provide high-value proteins and nutrients to poultry and aquaculture farms, avoiding the chemicals, erosion, deforestation, water loss, and everything else associated with conventional agriculture, growing corn and soybean feed for cattle and chickens. These insects, her favorite, are the mealworm beetle. In her terms, they take up little space, they live happily when they're jammed together, they survive without light, they breed throughout the year, emit few pollutants or greenhouse gases, and require little feed. And animals and fish seem to love eating them. So insects, Emery claims, are the most sustainable response to agricultural challenges. And added benefit that she likes to point out is that the bug's poop is referred to as frass, I love that term, is marketed as an organic fertilizer. This is Josh Goldman. He's the CEO of a company called Australia's Aquaculture. He wants to stop the enormous methane releases from burping cows that we discussed at the beginning. And he notes that there are 1 billion of these cows, each with a ruminant or 4-part stomach that releases 400 pounds of methane every single day. Methane is 84 times more potent than carbon dioxide when it comes to climate change. So this is a big problem, even if it sounds funny. So he tested hundreds of different ingredients and finally found that feeding a type of red seaweed in very small amounts to ruminant animals eliminates 80 to 90% of the methane during their digestion. Other entrepreneurs are using garlic or other plant-based enzymes as feed additives, somewhat similar to antacids for humans. So Goldman is working to scale up seaweed production. This, again, scaling up is the major problem for entrepreneurs, but ever optimistic. He calculates that if his additive were given to the world's cattle, it would provide the climate equivalent of taking every car and truck on the planet off the road. And finally, here are Lynette Kusma and Emilio Sepulveda. They're doing something a bit different. They're the co-founders of Natural Machines. They're making real this will age us, or at least it'll age me, the replicator that you might remember from Star Trek. It was that fantasy machine that synthesized meals on demand. Their device, called a Foodini, is about the size of a microwave, and it has stainless steel containers that store natural and fresh ingredients, and it's a computer that stockpiles recipes and can even link to your Fitbit so that it knows that if your meal or your candy bar that you needs to have some extra vitamin D or iron, since you just came back from a run, it's able to make the adjustments and produce your candy bar with the nutrients that your body actually needs. It has blue lasers that penetrate and heat the meals. It has infrared light that browns the surface to the eater's specifications. Several Michelin star chefs are using Foodinis already to dazzle their customers with exotic shaped appetizers. Other restaurants are using the device to attract customers who marvel at food being printed before their very eyes. And the KFC at several locations is selling chicken nuggets made from Foodinis. So according to Kushma, the Foodini will be like the microwave, as in ever present on people's counters, and will reinvent our culinary ways. I have to point out it'll do a lot to convince my wife that this is the future rather than the way that she currently cooks, but this is their optimism. So let me say I could go on with entrepreneurs for quite some time, as you would imagine, or you might sense. I kind of find them fascinating. But let me conclude that I think what's intriguing to me is not necessarily the specific examples, but that there's a quiet revolution that's disrupting the agricultural sector and creating new eating options. And the growth of farm and food entrepreneurs has been astonishingly rapid. None of the profiled companies existed even a single decade ago. No entrepreneur was producing cell-based proteins without slaughtering animals. No firm was challenging the horizontal farm and group were growing plants vertically. None were plucking weeds robotically or doubling the shelf life of produce with plant-based coatings. So here's the issue. Can Northeast Ohio take advantage of these ag tech developments as well as create opportunities for additional innovation? The region, as you know better than I, already is making strides, particularly your own efforts, as well as those of the Ohio Agricultural Research and Development Center in Worcester and OSU's new Controlled Environment Food Production Research Complex. The region, of course, can learn from efforts or be scared of efforts in other states and regions. As an example, in St. Louis, largely through its economic development partnership, it's creating the Danforth Plant Science Center, which already has attracted 10 scientific enterprises from Germany, Israel, and India. And it has a biotech incubator that is attracting and promoting business startups. Similar efforts are going on in North Carolina's Research Triangle Park and by the Western Growers Association. Allow me just to conclude, you're saying at last, in this era of troubled agriculture, I think you have the opportunity to offer economic and environmental gains, substantial environmental and economic gains for Ohio, as well as hope that the world can feed a growing population nutritiously, equitably, and sustainably. So I thank you for your invitation, for your patience and interest during all this, and also for your good works. I hope you enjoy Tech to Table, and I look forward to your questions as well as hearing of your ongoing success. So thank you.
Wow. Okay. That's just fantastic. And I have seen we have questions coming in, but I'm going to take the prerogative of asking the first question. has anyone invented a robot that can pick raspberries without squishing half of them? You know, get
They have done.
your hands.
There are ones that are picking strawberries and tomatoes and apples at various locations. They look very similar to the Zamboni little approach that you have here, but they, not unlike the picture on the cover of my book, there are robots that, the key part here is not only, you know, plucking them, but having the intelligence to be able to know when that apple is ripe, or which of the, you know, 5 strawberries on a plant are currently ready to be plucked, and which need to stay for another 3 or 4 days until they're totally ready. It's that type of artificial intelligence and the ability to utilize the new power of sensors and have the advanced computation ability to process all that data to make those important decisions that humans now do, but not that, you know, they do well, but the thought is that the computers can go through a field and make those decisions more rapidly and more accurately.
That's just amazing. And I'm looking forward to the pocket version I can bring with me to my next trip to the You Pick 'em farm. Why don't we go ahead? I'm going to turn it over to Madison, who has been collecting the.
Do I need to stop the share? Would that be best?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. Feel free at any time if you know, if you would like to go back and refer to some of your earlier slides and your responses. But we'll go ahead. I'll kick it over to Madison. Madison has been collecting the questions as they come in. So Madison, take it away.
Wonderful. Okay, our first question here. A great question. How do these new foods and technologies, or how will they impact the human gut microbiome? And what would be the consequences of ignoring how life has evolved over 4 billion years? Can you answer that?
No. There's not a simple answer. I mean, as I said, some of these innovations, you know, will they in fact improve, you know, human well-being as well as animal well-being as well as the nutrition? We don't know for sure, and we should be cautious. I mean, I'm not here to suggest, I mean, one of the dangers about talking about food is that the food that we eat is almost a religious experience. I mean, it is part of our, you know, culture. And so to suggest, you know, you look, you know, on TV ads, people are keto, vegetarian, vegan, I mean, the list goes on and on. I have absolutely no interest in making recommendations to people as to what they should eat, because it's a dangerous subject. But my point is that I think the new technologies that we have offer an opportunity for us at least to judge whether we're making progress towards having a more sustainable and nutritious, you know, food source. And no, don't trust these things, you know, outright, but test, evaluate, and verify.
Great, thank you. This next question is a little similar, but the Appeal product that you mentioned in your presentation, do you know if that maintains vitamins? Does that?
I'm told that it does. I mean, I have, and I've looked at some studies that seem to back up that claim, but obviously I haven't done the research itself. But yes, these coatings basically keep all the good stuff in and basically just don't allow additional oxygen in or water to be released. And as a result, the shelf life of that produce usually is at least double what it currently happens to be.
Wonderful. One more question here, but if anyone else has any questions, you can still put them in the chat. This question, are there vertical farms developing and growing capabilities of growing foods other than leafy greens or microgreens?
Well, I guess that is the challenge. At the moment, it's mostly produce because that's, you know, when you think about grains, you know, having massive multi-thousand acre farms to be able to produce corn or wheat, something that the vertical farms cannot now compete against. Will that change? I mean, the entrepreneurs, arrogant that they are, or idealistic or optimistic that they are, think that they will, that they'll be able to bring almost all farming indoors. We'll see. I don't know the answer to that, but at the moment, no is the short answer.
Okay. And I lied. One more. One more
Okay.
question. Where do you see the greatest potential for growth? What areas of development, such as field technologies or new protein development?
Well, I'll dodge the question first and then come back and admit my biases. But the dodge question is that I hope people don't think of this as a silver bullet, that there's only one form of innovation that will work. I think what is needed for us to be thinking about is how do we create a culture for innovation and entrepreneurs? And through that, a whole variety of different approaches, which I tried to have the innovators that I portrayed to be a pretty diverse lot. But of those that interest me particularly, the vertical farming I find just fascinating, simply because of just the massiveness of what it does to your brain of thinking about a whole new way of redefining the farm. And I guess at my age, I need to scatter or frighten my brain to think freshly about issues. And so that one fascinates me a lot.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Bara, this is your question. I don't know if you wanted to talk about the market conditions, but Bara entered into the chat. What market conditions or world issues do you think will have the greatest impact on driving this kind of food innovation?
I think they're varied ones. Some relate simply to equity, to overcoming the horror of having 14% of American households not have adequate food in this day and age is just shocking. I think there'll be other ones that come out that will surprise us, such as antibiotic use or the overuse of antibiotics, which I don't know if people know this, but most, in concentrated feedlots for when you fatten up cattle to get to the slaughter weight, you often give them a whole bunch of antibiotics to help them grow, but also ensure that they don't have disease. The worry is that we are oversubscribing antibiotics to the point that we're no longer effectively able to fight disease, and things like superbugs can open up challenges that we're not able to respond to because we've been so cavalier with throwing antibiotics out there. So I think the reasons for innovation will vary, and I think they're multitudinous. And the antibiotic one is one often overlooked, but I think could be a real surprise to us, as we have confronted COVID, of thinking what nasty little things can do to the world population. Possibly the overuse of antibiotics by agriculture will be viewed as a major issue that needs to be tackled and overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what happens when you say we only have one more question. More questions come in. So if you're okay, we'll keep going. Charles here asks, what are the main drivers for site selection of ag tech production facilities, resources, proximity to markets, et cetera?
I think at the moment, my observation, it has been proximity to intelligence. And I mean that in the sense that a lot of these have clustered around university centers, which is a great thing for you because you've got a lot of great universities in Northeast Ohio. So I think that's one of the key selling points that you have and you would benefit by marketing. I think that's going to change. I mean, the very initial stages were really locked into just a few, like Silicon Valley, but I think that's changing dramatically so that you're seeing a lot of other university-based communities being a magnet for these innovators. And I think, if I might, I think one of your challenges, and I wasn't kidding, in the midst of, like Upside Foods, as to where they place their next, food production facility, you should be out there hustling them. Tell them why, you've got great, ports and railroads and highways, to get to markets. You've got, universities with, biochemistry, graduates coming out the wazoo. I mean, they are looking for places, and to be honest, you got to sell yourself. And I think as they mature, they're going to be looking for that sort of combination of intelligence and market access and the diversity of the opportunities that exist within a community.
This next one is, how do you see biomimicry impacting the agriculture industry? So that question's for Jim.
It could be massive. I mean, you look at what's, one of the profiles that I did was of Jennifer Doudna's, spinoff. Jennifer Doudna received the Nobel Prize recently for the CRISPR technology that edits genes. Obviously there's a lot of emotion associated with going back to what we eat, the issue of GMOs, which are different significantly than what CRISPR is doing, but still the worry about bringing too much science into what is perceived as a natural food, whereas to be quite honest, it's not exactly. A lot of these breeding programs have gone on to make the foods that we have today. You can't walk through a market without realizing the genetic changes that have happened to virtually everything. So it's huge. It's with us. It has been with us for a while, and I think the new technologies will only accelerate the changes and possibly the controversies.
Good. This next one's a longer one. Adele is curious, did you visit any traditional or conventional farms during your research for the book, or strictly research tech alternatives? As a chairwoman for the Center for Food Innovation and a full-time beef and grain farmer, I welcome you to come out and visit the farm, and also see we did not overuse antibiotics. So.
No, yes is the short answer, and thank you for the invitation. I love visiting to see what innovative things farmers are doing in their own fields. I mean, it is it's a bit of a cliche, but I mean, I come from the environmental movement, which I think for the most part has been dismissive of the stewardship that conventional or regular farmers use on their own land. I mean, they've got a resource and that they cannot destroy because it destroys their livelihood, and the efforts that they go through to maintain sustainability is impressive. Now, at the same time, my knowledge and I, on a tour, I'd love to be shown that I'm wrong, but it's in many ways a scary business in the sense that you are risking a whole lot of money on both your equipment, your fertilizers, your seed, etc., on something that may end up getting washed away by a massive storm, or freight rates change, or Ukraine grain shipments come back into existence. I mean, there are so many uncertainties that farmers have to face, and the juggling that they go through is quite remarkable. That said, I admit that largely I was attracted to people who were thinking of different ways of farming or different means of presenting food. And so the book is somewhat biased towards that, but I hope not overly.
Good. I think we're going to round it out here with one last question, I promise this time. Do you see the younger generation more open to the new food forms? Are the markets like India that have large volume of vegetarians that are showing interest in these new food offerings?
Well, going back to the issue of farming, I mean, one thing that I heard with the farmers that I did meet with is just the fear of who's going to be farming in the future. So many that I met suggested that their kids or grandkids weren't going to do it. They couldn't afford to do it. They didn't want to risk doing it. It was not taking advantage of the educational that they had. So I think that there's a potential, no guarantee, but there's a potential that this move towards ag tech will entice a younger, educated, higher educated group of individuals to stay on the farm or go to farms, because it's an exciting place where there is new technology doing things that, this is not the world's largest industry for it is this world's largest industry for a reason. We need the food. It is a basic, sort of economic core. And if we can attract, young, bright individuals to be part of that, I think that's one of the most exciting parts of this ag tech growth.
Okay. Thank you.
So Richard, just following on the heels of that last question, and I see there's a couple other we're going to have to.
Yeah, no, I see one. They're exactly right. It is a large industry, but it also is not large from an employment perspective. And that has, I mean, one of the key demographic changes that historians look at is just the decline of rural population, particularly rural America. And, the segment of the population that are farming has just plummeted. And that's, a challenge going forward. Will that, can that change? Does it need to change, and can it?
Yeah, actually, that does raise a question because, we think about the issues. Our last panel that we had last week consisted of the local farmers. And so a related question I have is, should we be concerned that at least some of these new innovations, while scalable and potentially quite lucrative, might engender new forms of intensification that actually impede progress in addressing other important issues like land tenure or decline of rural communities? I mean, you spoke to this, but another way of asking the question is like, how might these innovations that are key to the realities of the existing mass markets and the global prices and so forth also complement those efforts among those who are championing local place-based food traditions and the essential role of small farmers and farming communities?
Well, this is a tough question that I haven't really totally figured out, because I think regenerative ag advocates and ag tech advocates share a vision and a mission, but they really differ on the way to do that, in the sense that the latter are far more trusting of science and technology than many in the regenerative camp. This is not a clean division between them, but generally that's the case. So what changes will result from even vertical farming, for instance? Will we bring more of this into urban or suburban centers? Will that mean that we have possibly less land under fertilization or cultivation, so that we might have the challenge of thinking about what do we do with open land creatively? Perhaps not going with urban sprawl, but using it, it opens up opportunities that I don't think we fully understand, or certainly I don't have the answer to.
Okay. Well, that's a question to continue pursuing, but really shed some amazing light on the current and future of farming and food production. I want to thank everyone for your questions, and especially thank you, Richard, for your work for this very timely conversation that deepens our understanding of current and coming attractions emerging from nature-inspired, maybe biomimicry-inspired human ingenuity, all of which is helping us to explore previously unimagined possibilities for transforming, growing, and producing ecologically smart food in our local region. As promised, we will be giving away a hardbound copy of Richard's book, a random selection, to one of today's attendees. So check your inbox in the next few days. You may be a winner.
My publisher is so happy.
So if you were unable to attend any of our previous 3 sessions, you're invited to link to the recorded versions that are on our website, foodinnovationsneo.org. That's all one word, foodinnovationsneo. Next week, we will be back again, same time, albeit with a different Zoom link. We will host an investors panel, including Brandon Day from the Yield Lab, a capital firm with a mission to enable entrepreneurs to sustainably revolutionize agri-food systems by investing in and accelerating high-impact early-stage companies all around the world. The Nonprofit Center for Food Innovation was organized to facilitate collaboration across the diversity of stakeholders interested in growing our local food economy. Again, please check out our website at foodinnovationsneo.org. And we invite anyone who is interested to please join us and share your talents as we continue to build our organizational strength and capacity to serve. So that's it for today. Everyone have a blessed weekend. Take time to fill your shopping bags with fresh Northeast Ohio food. And remember to thank the hardworking farmers and entrepreneurs who who bring this bounty to our tables. Spread the word, and we'll see you next week.